So we move on then to a consideration of, well then, does that mean that the definition in the Constitution of Métis peoples is a narrow one then? And I would say no, it's not as narrow as some proponents from the Métis Nation would argue. It doesn't automatically follow that the term Métis peoples includes just a historic Métis nation. There may be other communities besides the historic Métis communities that could satisfy that criteria of Section 35 and possess the characteristics of Métis-ness. For example, given the nature of the legal test for proven Aboriginal rights and the historical record, it may very well be, however, that the only Métis communities that could satisfy that test is the historic Métis Nation communities. But we shouldn't preclude the possibility in other parts of Canada that there are self-identified Métis communities that have a connection to a historic Métis community prior to the effective control of the Europeans. But so the term should be abstract enough then to allow for that possibility and not be restricted to the historic Métis Nation of the West. So in terms of kind of thinking through these, I've come up with a thought of what Métis should be seen as in terms of this somewhat abstract concept, but not so broad as to include those who more readily identify with their non-status Indian ancestors. So the term Métis peoples ought not to refer solely to the Métis Nation of the Northwest. There's also, of course, more to the meaning of Métis than just identifying with the label or name. Or I would add just identifying with the fact that there's an association who have mixed blood, but no other common features other than their association based on their mixed heritage. I think moreover then, for the purposes of constitutional interpretation then, that the Métis should be a legal concept and then not just simply a historical factual one tied to the historic Métis Nation. Did you do a... Okay. It's a concept that involves, I think, essential characteristics unique to Métis heritage peoples. It matters little whether the name Métis is used to describe the community. What matters is if the community possesses the characteristics of a Métis community. Understanding Métis from this perspective is why I think Justice Sharp in the Powley case agreed with the Crown that a politically constituted Métis association is not determinative of whether there exists a contemporary Métis community for the purposes of Section 35 rights. There needs to exist a Métis community that has a factual existence in the area and has continuity with the historic Métis community. What matters is not formal recognition, but the existence of a core of self-identifying Métis peoples who have significant roots in a particular area. The courts haven't examined, really, the characteristics of Métis communities. They've been concentrating more on whether an individual Métis person belongs to a Métis community and the criterion and definition for defining a Métis person that way. They haven't really spent a lot of time on what are the essential characteristics of a Métis community. So I offer the following definition just for food for thought. A community that identifies with its mixed heritage nature, whereby neither their European or Indian ancestors' cultural values dominate the exclusion of the other. It's a community which has a process of identity formation which has crystallized into a self-sustaining mixed heritage community whereby political and social forces within that community are clearly aimed at perpetuating this unique mixed heritage identity and culture. And of course, the community has to have evolved and they will need to have achieved this level of social political awareness, prior to the effective control of European authority in the area. Again, whether you agree with that actual time cutoff requirement is another issue altogether. This identity, of course, would manifest in culture and values that are distinct and different from both their Indian and European backgrounds. So that's where I want to head is the idea that a rational definition of the term Métis peoples in Section 35 would be broad enough, but only to the extent of recognizing the Métis communities that have a primary identity with their mixed heritage, such that unique and distinct cultures and are different from the Indian and European cultures. This would not include, of course, self-identifying Métis communities that emerged as a result of Indian Act displacement, and where such communities are predominantly culturally and linguistically a part of the Indian community in the area. Métis only makes sense if it reflects an identity with their mixed heritage nature, and that identity becomes manifest in something distinct and different from both European and Indian ancestors. If that isn't the case, then the community would be an Indian community in character, even if they may label themselves as Métis.